So in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the skeleton for your dashboard page or for a single page application, because your dashboard page would basically be the same thing. So to get started, I'm going to need to get my responsive engine set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off screen, as it typically takes a little bit too long. Alright, so now that I've got my page set up to be in the new responsive engine, I'm going to go ahead and set up the layout. So my layout for this is going to be column. I'm going to put the 1200 onto there. My minimum height, I'm just going to put it out to be 6000, just so I've got more space to work with things. Okay, so now what I want to do is I actually want to set up what are going to be the sort of like sections of this. And so I'm going to open up my elements tree to be able to visualize things as we add stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is going to add in a group. And this group, I'm just going to drop it right in there. I'm going to make it so that it is 1200, the same size. And I'm going to put a height of 6000 on it as well. This is going to be a row layout. And for this, I'm going to just select this one here, the space between. I'm going to put some color onto it so that we can actually see things. So let's get the style off and put a flat color. And I'm just going to put it as this sort of blue color there. Now I'm going to actually adjust this layout instead of being a row, because I'm not going to have anything on the left hand side that's going to be another group. Instead, my left hand side menu will be a floating group. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this out to be column, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be stacking things on top of each other. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and call this one group container. And my alignment, for right now, we can see these different choices: centered, right aligned. Horizontal alignment in this will not really matter, but if you want, you can maybe just select the centered. But for right now, things seem to be set up as they should be. The min height on this, I actually want it to be 100% though, instead of the 6000 pixels, because this is going to be something that will actually adjust to the height of the page when it is viewed by a user on their device. It's not 100% clear yet what Bubble's intention is here as to what 100% is, because it doesn't seem to actually work the same way every single time. I'm not really sure if that's supposed to be 100% of my page, or is it supposed to be 100% of the user's device, because in this instance my page is actually set up to be 6000. And we can see that this group container, when we scroll down, it fills up the entire space. So maybe it is looked at as if it is supposed to be 100% of its container. Alright, so right now I'm going to go ahead and just drop in some groups to be able to get some sections set up. So right now I'm just going to take a group and just drop that in. I'm going to have to go ahead and do the same sort of thing, setting it up. I'm going to put the height on this one to be around 600. And then my row, fixed row, whatever it is that you choose, doesn't really make a difference. It just can't be fixed. So I'm going to just choose column for right now and leave it as that. Now, when you end up making a choice about whether or not you're doing column or row or align to parent, that's going to be based around what the sort of content is that you're putting inside of this. So in this video, this is all about just a sort of skeleton layout, so that you can at least see how you can get a page put together to be able to kind of contain most things. And then what's going on inside of these groups is going to be much more specific to the sort of feature sets that you're putting inside of those. Remember that a dashboard is going to be a place where a user would be able to go to see all sorts of different things that are associated with their account within your application. So I have applications where my dashboards are where the users can set up their schedules, where they can see all their booked meetings, where they can actually request for changes to those meetings. They also are able to access their account details to make adjustments to their username, password, etc. So each of these groups are going to hold on to a specific feature set, and so it's going to be very much something that gets to be more specific once you know what you're putting into each. So doing this, I'm just going to leave them all as column for now. One of the other things I want to make sure of as I'm going through this is that I can see things, and so I'm going to remove the style and I'm going to put a flat color. So let's go ahead and choose a different color than what's already there. Let's get this pink, purple, whatever that might be. I'm going to just label this as group 1. Now, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to create in my database, I'm going to set up an option set. I already have some option sets set up that are pretty much the same idea. So I use these to be able to do the navigation. So right here, I'm going to create that. I'm just going to go ahead and label these as something that I will remember what they are. And so I'm going to end up with 7 different ones. So I'm going to come back into my design tab. I'm going to click on to the group 1. I'm going to hit my conditionals, and I'm going to end up doing the URL. And I'm going to get data from the page URL. My parameter is going to be called section, and then my type is going to be the option set that I just created, option navigation live. And now here, I'm going to be able to say is, and I actually need to come back into my appearance there, and I need to say the type of content. The type of content is going to be the same option set here. And now my data source, I'm going to label it as 1. That's the first option. So here in my conditional, I can say is, and this group's option navigation live. I'm going to check this off and say make it visible when that condition gets met. So onto my layout here, I can end up here, say collapse height when hidden, and uncheck the box for when it is visible on page load. So at this point now, things are basically set up to allow me to ensure that when this is being met, that this group will be visible, and when it is not being met, that the group will not be visible, and it will be collapsing its height and its width, and it would basically be removed from the page. So at this point now, I feel like I'm pretty much set up to start copying and pasting this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to copy and then paste. And now that I've got the group 1 copy and it's not visible, I need to go ahead and make it visible. And you can see here, it's directly underneath the one at the top. So to make that clear, let's go ahead and change the color on it. And now we can see that we've got the group 2. And let's get this group 2 into it as the label. And let's change the data source on it to 2. And now I can go ahead and continue to do this. I'm just going to do Control V. And as I did Control V, it seemed like it didn't come through for some reason. Let's do it again. All right, so now I've got the group 1 copy, and that goes ahead and puts it into a position. So let's go ahead and label that as 3. Let's put that down as 3. Let's change the color on this one, and let's make it there. Now you can see what ended up happening because I had basically pasted the group 1 again. It automatically got positioned directly underneath group 1 rather than directly underneath the last group within its container. So I can adjust for that. The way I'm going to adjust for that is I'm going to come into my layout, and I'm going to end up saying previous. And now you can see that that darker blue is in the second position, and then my third one there is in the correct position. So needing to avoid that, I'm just going to go ahead and be copying from the last group that is in the container and paste from that one. So I'm going to copy and paste that group 3. Now we've got this group 3 copy in here. I'm going to go ahead and label that off as 4. Let's get into it as the appearance and make a change to its color. And let's get that 4 into there. And so now we have that group 4 right underneath. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm going to get this set up to have all of my different ones. And what's really annoying is that you have to constantly come back in here and click to see it. I think it's terrible user experience for the developer to have to go through and do that, and that's all based on the fact that it is collapse height when hidden. I don't understand exactly what Bubble's doing. I do know that they are looking at this element as visible on page load and just automatically making it so that you don't see it if that's unchecked. But you know, it should be changed. Hopefully somebody at Bubble is listening to this type of stuff and they'll make those adjustments. So let's just get rid of that and make it 5 and hit the appearance and turn that into 5. And let's get the color to be something a little bit different. And let's go down and see where that is. Okay, so now we've got that group 5. Doing this now for a group 6. And let's get our group 6 in there. And let's change our color onto it. There we go. And let's get the dashboard navigation option set for the right data source. Okay, so now we've got our orange group. I'm going to go ahead and for the final group, and let's get this one set up. Let's get the name right. So let's get rid of the Y from the copy portion, and let's get this one set up. So group 7, and 7, and color change. All right, so at this point we've got our different groups set up. We can go ahead and preview this page and see how it looks. All right, so as soon as we see the page, we don't see anything on it. And before I move back into my editor, I'm just going to get rid of the debug mode and refresh the page just to double check things, and it still looks like it's a blank page. It's just white. Now, the actual page itself does have a color on it, or well, it should be. Let's go ahead and make this sort of dark color. Let's come back into here and refresh the page, and hopefully we'll see something. All right, so we see that the dark color is there, so at least we got the page going. So why is it that this group container is not being visible? The layout is set to be visible on page load. There's no collapse hidden or anything like that. The reason why is because it's fit height to content. So I'm going to go and uncheck that. And now let's come back in and see if we can refresh the page and see anything inside of there. All right, so I've got that group now. That is the blue group that is holding on to things, and we can see that it's not actually expanding out as we need it to. That's because it's set to fixed width. Let's get rid of the fixed width. Let's go ahead and put the min width at 100%, and let's get that there. So now let's come back and preview this. Alright, so now it's filling up the whole screen like I want it to. I'm not seeing any of my groups, right? I've got this group 1. That's because my URL parameter is not set up. So I'm going to go ahead and add that URL parameter in there. And so let me just type it in. Alright, so now that this is going to come up, we should see that. Okay, and that is also probably set to be a fixed width, so that was something I should have made sure of beforehand. So let's get rid of the fixed width. Let's change this off to be 100%, and let's get that there. So I'm going to have to end up doing this for each of these groups that I copied. I sort of went into the copy a little bit earlier than I should have. I should have checked with just that one group before making copies of everything. So I wouldn't have had to go through and do all of this to get everything else working correctly as well. So let's get these off to be 100%. And as we come down into here, let's go ahead and get every single one to 100%. And at this point, we are almost done with it. And let's see how this will end up working as we go through and make the changes to the URL parameter. When we preview the page, we should be able to just click into the URL and change the section number and be able to see things with the different colors as we go through that. All right, so that is working as expected. And right now, I just want to showcase one thing. If I take one of the sections, which is the final section, group 7, you can see from the red, which is the color of the group itself, and then below is the blue, which is the color of the group container. The group container is actually filling up the entire page, and the group red is not, and that's because of the minimum height of 600. It's not set out to be like 100% or anything. But what I want to do is just showcase that when you have a group inside of here that is going to stretch beyond the height of your device, then it will put in there a scroll bar for you. So I'm just going to put this height, let's just put this to be 1600 and see how that adjusts down. So it's going to be a little bit larger. And let's put the 7 into my URL. All right, so now that I've got section 7, I can actually scroll down, and that's just filling up the whole page. It's not, giving me anything below it, so you're not seeing the blue. I'm not 100% sure as to what's going on here. I think that it's a bug because my minimum height on the page is 6,000. I would assume that I would still be seeing extra space below that group, which is set to 1600. Again, this is something that's new. I'm not sure if these are bugs or if this is expected behavior, and I am constantly seeing things in here that I either assume is a bug, and I reach out to Bubble to find out what's going on and get some feedback from those engineers to tell me if it's expected or not, to give me a little bit more insight into how this is supposed to work. So next thing that we need to do is we need to get our left-hand side menu. Now, before we get into that, What I actually want to do is get things set up for my container elements. What I'm going to want is for when my floating group, which is going to be my left-hand side menu, is visible, I'm going to want the group container to actually be reducing its width, and so that way the content kind of gets shifted over rather than making it so that the floating group would be on top of the content. And to do that, it's going to end up requiring a conditional. And my conditional is going to be something that is actually going to change the property, and the property is going to be the left margin. And the left margin is going to be set to be 320. That's going to be the same that I set the floating group at. If I click onto the preview, you can actually see what ends up happening there. You get that space, that dark color is the color of my page. So if there were to be content inside of these containers, all of that content is just going to have its width shrunk. So if you're doing the right things with this responsive engine and making it so that all of your elements are completely responsive, they're just going to shrink as they should. And you're going to still be able to see all the content inside of there, just at a smaller width, while you can still also see the floating group. So I'm going to just uncheck this, and now let's put a floating group onto the page. So let's just go in and type floating group, and let's just click this into there. So now my floating group, I'm going to change the appearance. I want to give it a color so I can see it. And let's just do, white would be fine. So let's come into the layout here. I'm going to put the layout width of 320. And my container layout is going to be something that is going to want to have things stacked on top. So I'm going to, again, do column with this. And my minimum height is going to be 100%. And let's get that at 100%. Okay, so let's get my container set up. I want it to be the conditional to say when the floating group A is visible. That is going to be when my left margin is at 320. So let's go ahead into here and see what ends up happening when we preview the page. I'm going to keep this as it is right now, and it is set to be visible on page load. So let's preview the page and see what ends up happening there. Alright, so when I preview the page, you can see the floating group here and then the red. I have this nasty scroll bar on the bottom for a horizontal scroll. The reason why is because of the setting on the group container of the min width at 100%. I don't need that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And now when I preview this page again, we're going to see that the horizontal scroll bar will be removed. And that is going to adjust things the way that we actually want it to work, where our content inside of these sections is going to basically just have its width shifted down. When I had it set with the min width of 100%, it was staying 100% of the viewport, but it was adding a 320 pixel, and that's why we had that horizontal scroll bar there. All right, so I want to put something into the floating group. And let's get rid of these group containers so we can see our floating group. When I'm in the floating group, I'm going to put something inside of it. The first thing I want to put is going to be image. And let's just drag this to be the correct sizing. I want this to be around 30 by 30. And when I set this off, let's make it a fixed height and a fixed width. This is going to be the profile image of the user. And let's see what we got working with us. I want to get the margin on it because I don't want it to be all the way up at the top there. I want to put a top margin on it of around maybe say 60. And so now it's going to be brought down. Now there's various other things that you could end up being setting up here. What I actually would probably end up doing in this situation is not having the image first, because you can understandably see in this new responsive engine, it's not the easiest thing to be adding and moving things around. So if I wanted to do this right now and I wanted to say, well, I actually need to put like an icon to be able to close out that floating group. And so here I'm going to click into the floating group with an icon. What I need to do now is I need to come into my layout and I need to click on previous so that it goes up and then that image profile comes down. And when I do this, I would naturally need to adjust the margin on the top because I don't need it to be that far down. Now, on the layout on this, I'm going to put this to be around 20 by 20. And I'm going to make this one be a close. So let's go ahead and select close. And now let's get our layout positioned properly. I want it to be over on the right side, and I want the margin to be 10 and the top margin to be 10. So it's just right there at the top. I'm going to end up setting this up to be able to be closed, so I'm going to label it as such. So close floating. I also would probably rather prefer just say side menu. And so here I'll start edit my workflow, and I'm just going to come in and say element actions and hide the floating group. Okay, so let's go ahead and preview what that looks like on the page. Okay, so if I click this and hide it, you can see that the red ends up filling up the entire page again. And so at this point I need to put something into here to make it so that I could get that back. So in order to make it so that I'll be able to get it back, I'm going to actually end up doing a floating group at the top of the page, and that will act similar to a normal kind of header might. So let me just click that into the page there. Let's get this layout set up. I want the width to be 1200. I want the height of it to be 60, and I'm going to end up putting the setup to be row. And now I'm going to put my width not to be fixed width, and I'm going to get rid of the min width on it. And let's make the height fixed width and ensure that it doesn't expand anything beyond 60. I'm going to get my appearance on here set up to have some kind of color so that we can see it. And let's do this. Let's make it the sort of gray so we can see differences between our different stuff. So let's go ahead, floating group. I'm going to just label that off as header. And right now what I want to do is set up a conditional on this. The conditional is going to be that when the side menu, oh, I didn't label floating side, did I? Alright, so floating group, let's go ahead and just label this as side menu and come back into the floating header, and the side menu isn't visible. This element is visible. And let's go ahead and make it so that in the appearance it is not going to be visible on page load. That's in the layout section, so let's get rid of that here. So this seems to be set up as needed. What I need to do inside of it though is I actually need to give some kind of an icon to be able to show it. For that I'm going to use the material icon. I'm just going to click right into here with it. And something that Bubble really needs to do is make it so that these automatic width and heights that they're putting onto there, that they actually fit the container of the element that they're being put into. Absolutely no reason why it should be 80 when my container is 60, and it just makes it so it's a bad user experience, especially when this is for something where people don't really know how it's supposed to work. It should be set up to make it so it's just 60. So let's go ahead and set that off at 60. And let's do the width of 60, and let's just make this have a little bit of a, well, let's make it a fixed width for sure, and let's give a margin on the left of 20 so it's a little bit away. And I'm going to just end up choosing the menu icon here. And so let's go ahead and start edit workflow to say that when this is clicked, element actions, we show the floating side group. Alright, so now if I come back into my preview mode, we'll see how that works out. Okay, so by default my floating group side menu is visible. If I click onto this to close it, then we see the floating header come in, and if I click on this, then my side menu comes back up, and you can just continue to go back and forth and play with it and see how it works as you intended it to. Now back inside of the editor, I just want to play around and show you a little bit about what else you need to be doing here, and that is to adjust for the fact that when that header at the top is shown, then you need to push everything down, right? So let's go ahead and just add something into here. I'm going to go ahead and just put a text element into this first pink group. And why is that showing me like that? Let's get rid of the floating side menu. Alright, let's get that inside of there. I'm going to make this text element read something. Hello everybody. Yeah, so we got a little of a southern drawl on that. Alright, so let's go to the layout and let's make it not fixed width. Let's get rid of the min width on it. And actually the min width is going to be 100%. I want it to stretch out to fill the whole thing the entire time. My height on that, I'm going to put the minimum height at 0. and then I'm going to come into my text element and I'm going to remove the style, and I'm going to increase the size of it to say 36, and that's going to make it so that automatically the height element gets adjusted to that. I'm going to change the appearance on this and center it, and let's go ahead and just make this a little bit bolder so we can see. All right, so this is at the very top of the element, and let's come back into the preview. I'm going to put section 1 as visible, and let's see how that's going to look. My expectation is that we see it fine here, but when we close it, we won't see it. It gets hidden behind that menu, right? So we need to adjust for that. The way we're going to adjust for that is on our group container, which is holding on to all of our sections. We're going to put a conditional. We're going to set up this conditional that when the header is visible, I'm going to go in and put a top margin, and I'm going to put a top margin of 60. And so let's come back and preview and see how that works. All right, so let's close it out, and now we see it. All right, so open, close, everything's adjusting. These margins are fantastic. Bubble definitely needs to make sure that inside of our parameters we have access to everything that is associated with the layout to really give us full power of what we could do with this new responsive engine. So I hope that this has helped you to understand how to put together the skeleton for your one-page apps and dashboards. Thanks for watching the video. Hope that you found this helpful. If you'd like to be able to get editor access, please make sure that you check out the site, NoCodeTrainer.com. The link is in the description to the video, where you'll be able to gain access into the editor and be able to check out how things were set up within the application itself.